The level of violence among outlaw motorcycle gangs and criminal gangs across Sydney and Melbourne has reached a level that I can't remember it being as bad as this. I mean, you can go back to the so-called underbelly crime wave across Melbourne, where you had people like Carl Williams and Tony Mockbell going head-to-head with the Morans, and, you know, you had that dreadful shooting where I think it was one of the Moran brothers was sitting in the front seat of his car at a football game watching junior kids play footy with a couple of kids in the back seat, and an assassin called the Runner shot him dead in the head in front of his children. I mean, that doesn't get much worse than that. But we have seen now an assassination attempt inside a crowded gym foyer in Sydney, where innocent people could have easily been killed. And of course, on Saturday last week, you had this bloke called Sam the Punisher, which I don't like to give these people these exotic nicknames because it just gives them an ego boost. He was in his Mercedes G-Wagon in the middle of a funeral procession where a van pulled out. Someone leant out of the car and riddled the Merc with bullets, got him in the chest, and he drove himself to police stations in hospital. There's still been no arrest for that. That's in broad daylight on a Saturday afternoon. Terry Goldsworthy is a former detective inspector with 28 years in the force. He's now a criminologist at Bond Uni. Terry, thanks for your time and being willing for us to pick your brains on this. But do you remember a more violent time?
Look, it certainly there seems to be a resurgence of this public displays of violence. And look, it is concerning. I mean, whilst the violence is directed amongst the groups themselves, the fact is that they're doing it in such public arenas is the area of concern. I mean, we had bikies fighting here at, in the Gold Coast Shopping Centre, and one of them had a knife, one had a gun, and in the crossfire, a woman got shot and injured. So the potential for harm to members of the public is quite high. So incidents like this, you don't want them happening, and the fact that they've increased in recent times shows that there's obviously a lot of tension amongst criminal groups in the markets down there.
We'll get on to the shooting at that funeral in a moment, but I know you've got strong views on bikie laws. Now, I need you to update me on this, because what we saw was a state introduced non-association laws for bikies, and all that did was push them into another jurisdiction. They moved states to conduct their businesses. Where are we at with bikie laws in Queensland compared to New South Wales, compared to Victoria?
Yeah, look, Queensland and New South Wales have essentially the same laws. We took ours from New South Wales. Prior to that, we had what we called the VLAD laws, which were introduced in 2014. No one was successfully convicted under the association laws, under the VLAD laws. Under the current laws that we have that have been in since 2016, we've probably had less than 20 individuals criminally charged with consorting. And to my knowledge, none of them have received a jail term. The maximum penalty is 3 years. Most of them get a fine. What we have seen there's been 3 studies done in New South Wales, and looking at the data up here, is that I think in New South Wales there's somewhere around 35% of those who were targeted had no criminal history. The same up here, we've had any number of people who are warned for consorting. So you get warned first as a process, and then if you breach that warning notice, etc., you get charged criminally. And there's also no criminality attached to it. So people don't kind of realise that. They think these people are consorting, planning crimes. The police don't need to show any criminalities attached to the consorting. That's expressly provided for in legislation. So when we say, we're disrupting crime by consorting offences, I just would love someone in the media to ask them, well, what particular crime were they consorting about? Because there's no requirement for them to be doing that.
Back in the 80s, when I was a crime reporter, we at Russell Street in Melbourne had a consorting squad. And what the consorting squad used to do, they consorted all right. They would find out where these blokes were and front them and suggest to them that if they didn't clean their act up, they might pay with some hefty time in jail.
Yeah, look, it's, we had a consorting squad up here in Queensland too, but that ultimately called the Fitzgerald Inquiry, so they haven't gone back down that path.
Didn't work all that well in the end, did it? It's consorting ended up with some relationships that shouldn't have been born.
Well, that's it. I think the police got the wrong idea of what consorting meant. My issue with consorting laws is that they're not necessarily targeting high-level criminal activity, and that's what you want to do. I see the announcement of Task Force Viper today. I mean, you really need to be focusing on who is committing the crime, not just, who's in what groups. Because we know here in Queensland, I think in the initial data anyway, 40% of bikie members had criminal histories, the rest didn't. We've looked at the crimes that all the bikies commit, and what we can tell is that generally they don't commit crimes within the structure of the group. The group structure doesn't facilitate the crime. Individual members will go out and commit their own crime with other criminal groups. There's a great difference in terms of the type of crime that each outlaw motorcycle gang will commit. And of course, in the backdrop of that is the admission by the AFP 2 weeks ago that the mafia is a major player in organised crime in New South Wales, particularly with more than 5,000 members that they've estimated being present in Australia. So whilst, outlaw motorcycle groups do have violent elements, and there's examples, as you were saying in your lead-in, the criminal organised crime landscape is far broader than the usual suspects, which the bikies are.
I also note the establishment of Viper. That's important and needed. And I raise that in particular, and you are an ex-police officer. I wonder if some of the General Forces police are intimidated by these blokes. This bloke, Sam the Punisher, and I hate using that name because it just glamorises these, dickheads who think they can go around shooting people and dealing drugs without being arrested. But this bloke, Sam's in hospital, and a whole bunch of his criminal associates, including a bloke called Toby Mitchell, turn up at the hospital to visit him, and they park their car in an ambulance bay and leave it there for 2 hours while they go and chat to their mate.
Yeah, look, those kind of instances are just public displays of, these guys are all about reputation, power, greed, intimidation, and those kind of displays of doing acts like that. There's no tolerance for that kind of behaviour. I mean, I'm sure the police would have had a strong presence at the hospital. Someone in a senior position should have stepped up and said, get the car towed, or gone in front of him and said, move your car or we'll take it. You just don't allow them to get away with those public kind of, basically like laughing at you almost type issues.
Well, Viper is going to, day to day, apparently be deployed anywhere across Victoria at short notice to respond and shut down high-level crime networks. Well, and let's hope that works. That's going to mean that they're going to have to use those resources very nimbly, aren't they? Yeah,
look, it's I've had a read of it. It sounds good. I mean, they're talking about organised crime groups, so not just bikies, which is good to see that have got tunnel vision on already. They're talking about tactical and long-term investigations. So the tactical aspect will be there's a uniform component, which is obviously just going to go out and annoy the potential suspects, the people who they think are out there involved in these issues. And then you have the long-term investigation capability, which you need. Because ultimately, you can annoy these people as much as you want. If you don't shut down their criminal activities and enterprise, they're just going to continue to operate. So the long-term investigations are important, and they may well be a year or so in coming to fruition. You just don't know how long they're going to take. But certainly, I think on the face value, 80 staff is not bad. When we had the brawl up here with the bikies over the ex-girlfriend, that aggravated our government that much that we put about 200 police straight into it. So, 80 is a start, and I guess they'll see how they go, and if need be, they may need to put more resources into it.
We'll keep an eye on it. Thanks for your help today, Terry.
Thanks, Steve.
Terry Goldsworthy there, former police officer, 28 years experience, now at Bond University.
From 10.